Hi,
Hello.
ya estamos en vivo. Buenas tardes a todas y todos. Vamos a dar unos 2 minuticos para ver si más personas se conectan y ya arrancamos. Bueno, dale, empecemos, ya pasaron los 2 minuticos. Entonces, hoy nos encontramos acá en este webinar, Cambiando el mundo con videojuegos, con Juliana Cano, que es de Ruta Naranja, Ray Lindenman, que es de la Universidad College London, y Jack, que va a ser nuestro ponente. Entonces, por favor, saluden.
Hola a todas y todos, muchísimas gracias por conectarse en otro espacio más que estamos generando desde Ruta Naranja. Hoy también vamos a tratar el tema de videojuegos como otra empresa internacional y su experiencia ha venido generando como un impacto. Para los que no nos conocen, Ruta Naranja es una sede de la corporación Ruta N que se especializa en el fortalecimiento de emprendedores creativos y culturales. Tenemos una sede en el Distrito Creativo Perpetuo Socorro. Tenemos espacios de cowork, una oferta de acompañamiento para el fortalecimiento de los emprendedores y también incentivos para el sector creativo y cultural, para que se animen a conocernos, a venir a la sede y conocer como todos los procesos que estamos desarrollando en este momento. Entonces los dejo con Rey para que nos presente a nuestro speaker del día de hoy.
Hola, soy Railton-Woodcock, soy estudiante de University College London, como dijo Diane, y estoy haciendo mis prácticas profesionales aquí en Ruta N. Voy a traducir un poco a inglés, ya que Jack va a hablar en inglés. I'm Railton-Woodcock. I'm a student at University College London doing my internship at Ruta N with Diane and Juliana. And today we have the pleasure of having Jack Railton-Woodcock to speak with us about his role in Lumi Interactive and the video game and his career journey. So Jack, I'm going to pass it over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. Thank you for having me. Shall we get into the presentation?
Okay. Diane, la presentación.
There we go. Hello everyone. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Jack Railton-Woodcock. I am the brand manager at a small video game developer called Lumi Interactive, based here in rainy Melbourne, Australia. It's about 8:30 a.m. in the morning over here, so good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So at Lumi, we're currently hard at work on our first game. It's called Kinda World, and it's a free mobile game all about houseplants, healing, and practicing kindness. So yeah, thanks for having me. This is what I'm going to be talking about today. So creativity, and specifically how I think it can be used to make the world a better place. Yep, that's me. I realize my webcam is also on screen, so maybe the slide is a bit redundant. But in this talk, I'm going to tell you about my career so far, starting in advertising and now video games. And I'm going to talk about all the different ways that I've tried to use creativity as a force for good. As you'll hear, it hasn't always been easy, and it definitely hasn't always been successful, but I have learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way, which I'm excited to share with you all. So I do want to make a quick note that everything I say today comes from my perspective as a cis-het white man, which obviously means I've benefited from a lot of privilege in my life and still do. I'm also a huge nerd, and I'm much more comfortable behind the camera than I am here in front of it. So please bear with me if I get a little tongue-tied. Just go back one slide. That's my Twitter handle is down the bottom there. It's on the last slide as well. But if we do have a bit of time for questions at the end. We're going a bit far. We do have time for questions at the end. But if there's anything you want to chat about after we're finished today, that's probably going to be the best place to reach me is on Twitter. So yeah, let's get into it. Ultimately, this here, Kinda World, is what I'm here to talk to you about. It's the game we're working on, and it's part cozy houseplant game, part evidence-based well-being app. And I think it's the perfect example of creativity being used to make the world a better place. It's going to launch in November. And when it does, I genuinely do believe it's going to help a lot of people. Hopefully, some of you watching this today, I hope. My role on the Kinda World team is the brand manager, which means I'm leading on the organic marketing side of things, which basically means I get to be creative every single day, not by writing the code for the game or creating the art, but by thinking up interesting ways to tell the world about what we're working on. So in some ways, me being here, talking to you about Kinda World is organic marketing. So thanks for this opportunity to do my job. So before I tell you more about this amazing game that we're making, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, kind of how I came to be here on the other side of the world in Melbourne, Australia, speaking with you all today. If you just go to the next slide. So before I worked in the games industry, this is what I did. I was a creative director at an advertising agency. From the very beginning of my career, I naively maybe thought that creativity could be a force for good, because which brands wouldn't want to make the world a better place, I thought. It wasn't long before I came crashing back down to earth, because unfortunately, it turns out that some brands do just want to sell chocolate, and they're really not particularly interested in anything else outside of that. I learned pretty quickly that the brands I was creating these advertising campaigns for had very real goals. They had sales targets to hit, brand recognition to increase, and ultimately, they had products to sell. So as a young advertising creative, I was faced with a choice. I could either just do what these brands wanted and make a million crap ads with 50% stickers and one price fits all in huge print. Shots fired at McDonald's. Or I could convince these marketing folks, my clients, that there was a better way, a way for their brands to make the world a better place, one advertisement at a time. And I don't mean by giving out free credit scores. If you just go to the next slide. So that's Melbourne on a much nicer day than today. It's not a big city, especially not compared to the kind of heavyweights like London and New York. It's actually only twice the size of Medellin, but its advertising industry has always punched well above its weight. So when I first started out in advertising, I was lucky enough to be surrounded by some of the most impressive creative minds in the world, like some legit creative geniuses. They taught me that it wasn't enough to come up with a great way for a brand to help people. I needed to be able to prove that my ideas would help clients meet their marketing goals, increase brand awareness, sell product, that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, my job was to make my clients look good in front of their bosses, and I wasn't going to do that by convincing them to spend their marketing budget on helping people, like donating it to a charity, for example. They had to see a return on investment.
Okay, Jack, I'm just gonna quickly do a little summary in Spanish of what you just said until now. Sorry, just a little pause. Para ustedes en Colombia o que hablen español, voy a hacer una pequeña resumen de lo que Jack nos ha hablado hasta ahora. Pues está contando a nosotros sobre su experiencia antes de su trabajo ahora en Lumi Interactive, en la industria de videojuegos, trabajando en la industria de marketing, de publicidad, y muchas veces él no como entendía, como había muchos proyectos que para él no tenían muchos como propósito, por ejemplo, como decir, como rebaja de 50% para una publicidad, pieza de publicidad para McDonald's, por ejemplo, y él quería hacer algo con más propósito, con que tiene más impacto en el mundo. Y ahora nos está contando sobre Melbourne, la ciudad en que él trabaja, que es muy pequeña, más pequeña que Medellín, pero tiene muchas oportunidades y es una ciudad muy bonita. Yes, Jack, you can continue.
Oh, good, thank you. Yeah, what Ray said. So I was talking about how it wasn't really enough to want to make the world a better place. Like the clients I was working on really had like marketing goals they had to hit. They had product to sell. So this is kind of how I started to think about it. If you go to the next slide.
Siguiente página, por favor.
Solar-powered electricity was invented more than 100 years ago. And it's really only now becoming mainstream in the last maybe 10 years or so. Even back then, they knew that it was better for the planet than burning fossil fuels. But the reason it took until now to break through is because it's taken until now to become profitable. These days, people want to pay companies to put solar panels on their roofs, and they'll spend a lot of money on electric cars. You could argue that Tesla, for example, are making the world more sustainable, but they're also making a lot of money in the process. It's never been about the scientists saying that sustainability is important. It's always been about the consumers saying it with their wallets. And so I figured it was up to us, the creatives of the advertising industry, to figure out a way to do both things at the same time, which is sell product and make the world a better place. Which brings me to lesson number one. The first lesson I learned is that saving the world is not enough. It doesn't matter how pure your intentions are. Businesses exist to make money. Even the non-profits have bills to pay. It was a hard lesson to learn, but it's true still. Saving the world has to be worth it to someone.
I'm going to translate that first lesson. Pues la lección número uno que aprendió Jack a través de su carrera es que pues es importante como el propósito y las metas de una compañía, una empresa son importantes, pero también como la intención, no es solo sobre la intención, al fin del día, como al fin de cuentas, las empresas tienen que ganar dinero y ellos tienen que lograr algunas metas y un número, y eso es importante para alguien que está haciendo marketing y publicidad. Okay.
Thanks, Ray. So this is kind of one of the first campaigns I worked on, and it's sort of cheating a little bit because the client was the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation. So these people did want to make the world a better place. I didn't have to convince them that gambling was bad and someone should do something about it, because that's what they were doing. The problem that they were facing was that gambling in Australia was being treated as a normal part of sport. So mainly due to gambling advertising being more effective and insidious than ever. So we did a lot of research, and we found out that 75% of high school students in Australia associated gambling with sport. One child in every Australian classroom had a problem with gambling, which, when you think about it, is like wild, really. So we came up with this idea. It's called Reclaim the Game. And the goal of the TV campaign was to let parents know that their kids probably knew more about gambling than they realized. The idea we had was just to show parents how much their children were being exposed to gambling on a daily basis. We made a TV campaign that showed young Aussie kids speaking normally about their favorite sport, basketball, rugby, etc. But while they were talking, they'd casually drop gambling terminology into their conversation just as if it was a normal everyday thing. The client spent heaps of money to run the campaign during the AFL Grand Final, which is basically the Super Bowl of Australia. It got seen by millions of people, and it didn't work. Gambling rates went through the roof. The gambling companies make heaps of money off young Australians, and they're probably more successful today than they ever have been, ever. Which takes me to lesson 2. Just on the next slide, which is saving the world is really hard. With this one, we really felt like we were on track to make a difference. We had a great idea for a great client with great intentions, and it didn't work. It's hard to say the reason why, but I suspect it's because there's more money in gambling than there is in anti-gambling, because, as you probably all know, the world we live in, money really is everything. Ray, do you want to translate that bit?
Yes. Okay, one second. Pues, sí, voy a traducir la lección número 2. Pues, como dice en la página, saving, o en la pantalla, saving the world is really hard. Es muy difícil salvar el mundo. Sí, okay. Go ahead. Jack, over to you.
Thank you. This is good teamwork. So the next one was for the University of Melbourne. So this one also a little bit of a cheat as well, because universities are obviously doing great things all the time. For this job, we were given a list of hundreds and hundreds of different research programs that the university was involved in, and almost all of them were on really boring topics. They were incredible, like groundbreaking initiatives, but they were kind of boring. So it was our job to use our creativity to figure out how to make these really complicated, boring, but still really great initiatives sound interesting to your average person on the street. So the next slide. So the campaign we came up with was called Research You Can Eat. And the idea was basically that it doesn't matter how complicated the subject is, everybody understands the universal language of food. Mm-hmm. So these are a series of activations we kind of ran over a year or two. In the top left, the research said that something like 75% of the world's population eats a diet that consists mainly of rice. But the problem was that rice doesn't have enough nutrition in it to really sustain someone's diet. So the researchers at the university had figured out a way to make iron-enriched rice, which is a bit of a weird thing to kind of talk about. But the way we did it was we started a pop-up shop where we served rice pudding using this rice. And sort of it was called the Empty Bowl. And as you ate the rice, it would sort of tell you the story on the inside of the bowl. On the top right, there was, as we were reading the list, we saw lots of different projects that were aimed to help the survival rates of unborn babies. And so we saw there was some projects and it was very, very complicated. And at the bottom, it would say, we estimate this is going to save 100 unborn babies' lives this year. And we found a few like this. And we realized that the total of all these projects was hoping to save roughly 1,000 unborn babies, which was amazing. So we threw a party with 1,000 tiny birthday cakes. You can see in the image on the top right. I don't know if you've ever seen 1,000 tiny birthday cakes, but it's a lot of birthday cakes. I had to take some home.
1 second, I'm just going to translate just a little bit of that.
Yeah, go for it.
It's a lot of really cool stuff. Sí, una de las campañas que hizo Jack fue para la Universidad de Melbourne, y ellos tienen muchos proyectos y estudios que son súper interesantes, pero como el público, la gente, no había muchas maneras de publicar y compartir esta información muy importante con el público. Y entonces ellos tenían que pensar en maneras creativas, interesantes, para compartir todos estos estudios súper interesantes en una manera que sea interesante y fácil de entender para el público. Entonces ellos hicieron como una campaña o una fiesta con muchos pasteles y como usaron la comida, el tema de la comida para compartir esta información. Sí, y okay, the third lesson.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, lesson number 3 was that saving the world can be a lot of fun. Obviously, it was kind of lots of hard work and late nights, but thinking up that we should start a rice pudding pop-up shop was a really fun time. Working on something genuinely meaningful and kind of genuinely good is, in my opinion, the most fun a person can have while they're at work.
Okay,
sorry. Go for it.
A lot of back and forth. I'm going to translate that. Lección número 3 es que puedes disfrutar el proceso de cambiar el mundo. No tiene que ser algo aburrido, como la mejor parte de hacer todos estos proyectos y ser parte de marketing y todo lo que Jack ha hecho es que puede ser súper divertido y eso es súper importante también. Over to you.
Thank you. Cool. So the next one I'd like to talk about is Pepsi. And I want to be clear that I did not work on this campaign, but I did learn quite a bit from it because it was quite popular. Not popular, very unpopular. If you just go to the next slide. Infamous is probably the word I'm looking for. So I don't know if anyone remembers this ad when Kendall Jenner ended racism with a can of Pepsi. But I'll describe it for the lucky few of you who might have missed it. I'll describe it in English. Maybe Ray can translate. It's April 2017. We open on a Black Lives Matter rally. Tensions are high. Armed police are patrolling the streets. Kendall Jenner is modeling at a photo shoot nearby. And when she sees the rally, she can't help but join in. She pulls off her blonde wig, wipes off her lipstick, walks over to a big ice bin full of Pepsi, grabs a frosty can, and a black man in the crowd gives her a fist bump, giving her the confidence she needs to walk over to the armed police officer, hand him a Pepsi, and the crowd goes wild. Pepsi did it. They solved racism and saved the world. As you can imagine, here you can see the memes. The memes were pretty great, but people were pretty upset. They quite rightly felt as though Pepsi was trivializing something that was really important to a lot of people without actually doing anything to help anyone. People were furious.
Okay. Wow. Can I translate that?
Yeah, go.
Okay. Algo muy importante que tenemos que entender antes de empezar con esta parte es que Jack no era parte de este proyecto. Pero sí que aprendió muchísimo porque no sé si ustedes conocen esta campaña de Pepsi como de hace creo que 4 años, hace algunos años, pero había una campaña, publicidad muy controvertida en que Kendall Jenner, parte de la familia Kardashian, ella está trabajando como modelo, ella es una modelo, y hay una marcha contra el racismo porque en esa época había, pues todavía existe definitivamente, pero el movimiento Black Lives Matter muy importante en los Estados Unidos y había una marcha para Black Lives Matter y en la campaña, en el video, lo que pasa es que Kendall decide que con un Pepsi puede resolver el problema de racismo y eso fue la campaña de Pepsi y obviamente causó mucha controversia y muchos problemas porque el racismo y las cosas no funcionan así y fue muy ofensivo para muchas personas. Pero sí, Jack aprendió muchísimo a través de esta campaña de Pepsi. Okay.
Great. So lesson 4, the lesson that we learned from, well, everyone learned from watching this campaign, is that actions speak louder than words. It's obviously a bit of a cliche, but you can't just tell everyone how good you are without actually doing any good. There's a huge difference between a brand saying they're making the world a better place and the brands that actually do. There's quite a big problem, I think, with something called virtue signaling, which I could probably do a whole talk on, but I'll save that for another time, because the important part is this. If you're going to say you'll make the world a better place, then actually do it. It's kind of just that simple. So I've got one more ad campaign to talk about before I tell you a bit about Kinder World. And this one I did work on. Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Ray.
I'll just translate that lesson 4, lección número 4, también muy importante. Las palabras son muy importantes, claro que sí, pero lo más importante es la acción, son las acciones. Puedes decir todo lo que quieres decir, pero al fin de cuentas tienes que mostrar la acción, y eso es una cosa que Jack aprendió a través de su trabajo. Yeah, go on.
Great. So yeah, one more ad campaign to talk about, and this is one that I did work on, unlike Pepsi. So Cadbury is one of the biggest chocolate brands in the world. I don't know if it's in Colombia, but in Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, it's huge. And one of their most popular products is this little guy on the next slide.
La siguiente página, por favor.
Yes, this guy. It's a chocolate frog named Freddo. So research told us that back in 2019, 1/3 of the world's frogs were facing extinction, and 9 of those endangered species lived in Australia and New Zealand, where Freddo was most popular. We figured that someone had to do something to save these little green friends, and Freddo was the right frog for the job. So what we did is we got Cadbury to take Freddo off the packaging and replace him with the endangered frogs of Australia and New Zealand. Every package sold became a little augmented reality experience where kids could scan it with their phone, and the frogs would literally leap out and crawl around while a narrator would share some facts about the frogs and, importantly, what people could do around the house and the garden to help save them. But we weren't going to make the same mistake as Pepsi. We couldn't just change the packaging and call it a day without actually doing anything to help. So what ended up happening was Cadbury donated a portion of their proceeds from every Freddo sold, which ended up raising $2 million, which all got donated to endangered frog conservation efforts like Zoos Australia, conservation volunteer associations. And people loved it. Freddo flew off the shelves, setting sales records all over the country. We finally managed to make the world a better place and meet our marketing goals at the same time. It was a lot of hard work, but the lesson we learned was a good one.
Okay, that's a really cool project. I love that. Sí, básicamente uno de los proyectos que hizo Jack fue con una marca de chocolate que se llama Cadbury. No sé si existe en Colombia, pero en Australia, los Estados Unidos, Inglaterra es muy famoso. Personalmente me encanta Cadbury. Y hay una rana que se llama Freddy, que representa la marca o uno de los productos más importantes, más conocidos de la marca Cadbury. Pero algo muy importante también es que las ranas, de hecho, son uno de los animales en peligro de extinción, especialmente en Australia. Entonces, lo que ellos querían hacer era como cambiar o hacer que esa rana, Freddy, sea como la rana específica que era en peligro de extinción en Australia. Y fue un éxito en Australia. Pero otra cosa que hicieron Cadbury, que Si recordamos la lección número 4, creo que era las acciones son más importantes que las palabras. Lo que ellos hicieron también fue hacer donaciones, donar dinero para ayudar a las ranas en peligro de extinción, y eso también fue un éxito. Sí, Jack, over to you.
Thanks. So yeah, brings us to the last lesson from my sort of advertising past, which is it can be done. We didn't save the world, but we did save a lot of endangered frogs, which is something that I'll always be very proud of.
Okay, I love that. Lección número 5, la última lección es que sí que se puede hacer. Es como a lo mejor no vas a salvar el mundo entero y todos los problemas del mundo, pero sí que puedes salvar muchas vidas como la vida de una rana, por ejemplo, y eso hizo muy feliz. Entonces sí que se puede.
Cool.
Okay.
So that sort of brings us up to the present day. And yeah, I've got a bit of time left. I'm keen to talk about this, which is what I'm working on right now. And to be honest, I think it might have a bigger impact than all the things I've talked about so far combined. It's a free mobile game called World. Sorry. And it's a cozy houseplant game about taking care of houseplants on the one hand, but then looking after yourself in the real world. It's designed to improve the mental health and resilience of our players. And so it's designed to be played only for a couple of minutes each day. And even though it's still a few months away from a full launch, tens of thousands of players have already added it to their well-being routines, and they seem to be loving it. So when I joined the team, obviously armed with the lessons that I've sort of taken you through today, I did have one very important question, which was, will it actually work? Will it actually help people? Because if it didn't, and if it was all just nonsense, then we'd just be doing what Pepsi did, telling the world, talking to people like you about all the great things we're doing without actually doing anything.
Help people?
Well,
Because
it really does work. We have a full-time well-being researcher on the team, Dr. Hannah, and they spend all day reading the latest scientific literature about all sorts of interesting things like community well-being and the mental health benefits of video games. And they've actually found a lot of research about a phenomenon that we're calling crowd healing. If you just jump to the next slide, which is, this is essentially what our game is all about. It's the evidence-based practice of collective healing. Science tells us that simply being an active member of a kind community, like World, is an effective way to heal from the stresses of everyday life. In other words, when it comes to improving your own individual well-being, the more kind folks you surround yourself with, the better. Ray, do you want to translate?
Por favor, para que pueda ver lo que está escrito. Yeah. Okay, so básicamente, ahora estamos hablando de lo que Jack está haciendo ahora mismo en Lumi Interactive, y uno de sus videojuegos que ellos están desarrollando ahora se llama World. Se puede traducir como un mundo más amigable, literalmente. Y es básicamente las personas pueden crecer sus propias plantas en una casa, y también crear una comunidad virtual, una comunidad amigable, una comunidad en que se puede sentirse en casa. Y Jack también, una de sus preocupaciones que tenía antes fue si como un concepto, World es increíble, como una comunidad, que se siente mejor, que se cuida tu salud mental, pero no sabía si iba a funcionar. Pero hay mucha evidencia científica que dice que tener una comunidad, aunque sea virtual o lo que sea, puede tener efectos muy saludables y efectos muy beneficiosos para la salud mental de las personas. Y este efecto se llama crowd healing. And yeah, you can go to the next page.
Great. So that's us. That's Team Lumi, or it's sort of half the team. It's the Melbourne team. There's about 15 of us in total. Some of them might be watching online. Hello. But as you might have heard, or you can see there, that Kinda World actually secured a record investment earlier this year from an overseas investor, which is kind of based on our findings and based on our research. And based on our investors' belief that Kinda World is truly going to make the world a better place. So it's kind of helped me learn the last lesson that I've got for you today, and I think it's the second last slide, which is that creativity is well and truly a force for good. I think if you just go to the next slide. It's the Kinda World, what we're working on really is proof that the world wants, people are willing to pay for great ideas that really do make the world a better place, which I think is really encouraging for the future. So I think that's me done. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you listening to me talk for 45 minutes or so in English and Spanish. If you don't mind just going to the last slide.
The previous one?
No, sorry, the next one.
I see.
Yeah, I've just got some call to actions there. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow Kinda World on TikTok and every other social media. You can visit our website to find out more about the game. And I also want to shout out Hui, who was my creative partner in advertising, who I came up with those ideas with. But most importantly, I'd love if you could all download Kinda World. It's on the App Store and Google Play. And yeah, let me know what you think.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to translate the very last part.
Yeah, go for
it. Dos páginas anteriores, por favor. Creo que sí, ok. Y la última cosa que dijo Jack, pues podemos ver una foto aquí en esta página, pero otra cosa muy importante sobre Kinda World, sobre Lumi Interactive, es que las fundadoras son pues 2 mujeres. Y eso es muy importante, especialmente en la industria de videojuegos, en la industria de tecnología. Algo súper bueno. Y también recibieron, Lumi Interactive, ellos recibieron una inversión que rompió los records, no sé cómo se dice en español, un record-breaking investment, que es un logro muy, muy importante, muy grande. Siguiente página, por favor. Gracias. Y entonces, la última lección número 6, creativity is a force for good. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Básicamente la creatividad es una fuerza para el bien. Se puede hacer muchas cosas con la creatividad que tienen un efecto, un impacto muy grande y muy real en este mundo para muchas personas. Siguiente página, por favor. Muchas gracias. Y aquí tenemos el Twitter, TikTok, y el sitio web y el Instagram de Jack y de Kinda World y del equipo de Kinda World. Y por favor, descarga Kinda World en el App Store. Se puede encontrar en Apple y también en Google Play. Sí, Okay, muchas gracias. Thank you, Jack. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So many cool things to learn. Well, we actually have a few questions for you since we still have some time. The first question, I'll say this in English and I'll also say it in Spanish. So the question in English is, can you give us any advice on transitioning between the two industries that you've worked in? So marketing and publicity to, I guess, the video game industry. So I'll say that in Spanish. ¿Podrías contarnos un poco, darnos unos consejos sobre cómo se puede transicionar entre dos industrias muy diferentes, la industria de marketing, de publicidad, a la industria de videojuegos? Okay, over to you.
So I think obviously working in the video game industry is like the dream job for a lot of people, or it was for me. It was for me at least, because I'm a huge nerd. But I think what I learned was that like the best way in was to use what I was already good at, which was marketing. So I'd love to make a game one day and all that sort of stuff. But I think stick to it. My advice would be to stick to what you're good at and figure out how you can use that to benefit a video game company or benefit the industry in some way, rather than starting again and sort of throwing out all your work and starting again and trying to make a fresh start in games.
Okay, sure. Gotcha. Thank you. I'll just quickly translate that as well. So, el consejo que nos da Jack es que, pues, para él, trabajar en una empresa de videojuegos, o sea, la industria de videojuegos siempre ha sido un sueño. Y él cree que para mucha gente probablemente es un sueño como trabajar en la industria de videojuegos. Es muy cool. Pero él nos aconseja que hay muchas maneras de entrar en la industria de videojuegos, por ejemplo. Claro que algún día en el futuro él también quería desarrollar un videojuego, como programar un videojuego, pero por ahora él, como ya tiene experiencia, ya tiene talento en marketing, en publicidad, y hay muchos puestos que, o sea, la industria de videojuegos también necesitan gente que saben hacer estas cosas. Entonces no tienes que dejar toda tu experiencia que ya tienes. Puedes o deberías usar esta experiencia y las cosas que ya sabes hacer para entrar, para transicionar en una industria nueva. Sí. Thank you. Really good advice. Thank you so much. And okay, you are the brand manager for Lumi Interactive, Kind of World. Could you tell us or give us some advice on becoming a brand manager? What is it actually like? And yeah, what advice would you give to anyone wanting to be a brand manager specifically?
I think in video games, it's there obviously are brand managers out there, but it's kind of a bit of a rarity. I think quite often you find in video games, like studios will be started by a programmer and an artist, and marketing is kind of put to the side a bit. So I think if people want to work in marketing in the games industry, I think it's a good idea to find companies that do already have, they do place an emphasis on marketing, which luckily for me, Lumi does. But yeah, I mean, I think these days the video game industry needs marketing, whether they like it or not. So I think if you're good and you're passionate about it, then yeah, that's kind of the best way in.
Okay, great. Okay, I actually didn't see the question in Spanish, so I'll say the question and your answer.
Oh, sorry.
Pues yo pregunté a Jack, ya que es el gerente de marca de Lumi Interactive, de Kind of World, y quería saber qué tienes que hacer para ser el gerente de marca y si él tiene consejos para nosotros. Y él nos dijo que, pues primero, tienes que tener en cuenta que en la industria de videojuegos, él dice que no hay muchos gerentes de marcas, no es un puesto muy común, por lo menos ahora en la industria, con más y más, cada día más, hay más oportunidades para gente que hace marketing y publicidad en esta industria y también cree que es muy importante el marketing y la publicidad en esta industria también y va a crecer, las oportunidades van a estar ahí en el futuro. Y si quieres ser un brand manager, gerente de marca, en esta industria, pues tienes que tener la pasión y el conocimiento y sí, y así se puede hacer. Okay. Y creo que, okay. Now, so we have some comments here. Just going to read them out. Tenemos algunos como preguntas y comentarios. Jordi Barrera, muchas gracias. Me gustarían más espacios como estos. A mí parece la parte más difícil es pasar de las palabras a la acción. Se necesita tiempo, dinero, la mayoría de veces, como superar esta fase. Sí, estoy de acuerdo. So basically, Jordi Barrera from our YouTube comments says that he would like more spaces like this. He thinks that the part that's really often the most difficult is, as you say, going from just words and putting them into action. It requires time. A lot of times it requires money, funding, to kind of bring it to life, bring it to action. So yeah, Jack, if you want to comment back to
Yeah, I mean, Geordie's hit the nail on the head. It is really hard. It's really hard you can have the best idea in the world, but then you've got to you've got to spend time working on it. You've got to raise money to actually make it. Like nothing's cheap and nothing's free. Like it's hard work, but I think that's where having purpose comes in. Like if you really do care about what you're doing, then the hard work becomes easy. Mm-hmm. Like finding money, like that's obviously hard. Like you could speak to the co-founders of Lumi, who worked for years and years and years to raise money to make Kind of World. But as you can see, like the reason we're here and we're working on it is because that hard work sort of paid off. It's a mixture of luck and hard work and talent, and yeah, certainly not easy.
Sí, él dice que estoy de acuerdo, Jordi. Muchas gracias por decir esto porque es algo muy importante. Y Lumi Interactive también como ha tenido muchos problemas o ha sido muy difícil recaudar fondos y sí, exactamente lo que dices tú, Jordi. Pero como ya dije antes, si tienes un purpose, el propósito, si tienes esa pasión y esa como goal, esa meta en tu mente siempre, sí, se puede y va a ser, pues no va a ser fácil, pero va a ser un poco más fácil. Y eso es muy importante. Thank you. I don't know if you have more comments or questions, but I think Rihanna might join us again. Oh no? Okay. In that case, I have one more question for you. Tengo mi última pregunta. Let's see. Okay, do you have any advice for anyone entering into just the creative industry? I think everything you've done so far has been creative in some aspect. So,
I do have some advice. So I think one of the things that especially when you're a creative person, especially it was for me when I was younger, but it's quite hard to separate. You need to separate yourself from the work, because I think when you're passionate about like creating something and you give your whole self into it, and then like in my case, an advertising client says, "Oh, I don't really like this idea." You can't be like, oh, like you can't like take it so personally. That they're not saying they don't like you; they're just saying they don't like the idea. So I think passion is important, and you have to give 100%, but you do have to keep that sort of distance between yourself and the work.
Okay, that's really interesting, actually. Okay, pues mi pregunta, mi pregunta, Jack, fue si él tiene consejos para como nosotros que quieren entrar en la industria creativa, sea marketing, publicidad, videojuegos. Y Jack nos dijo que algo muy importante es que tienes que tener un poco de distancia, un poco de una separación entre tú mismo y tu trabajo. Obviamente es muy importante tener esa pasión y como y trabajar con toda tu energía en cada proyecto, en cada minuto, cada segundo, pero a veces tienes un cliente y el cliente rechaza tu idea, y si es algo personal para ti, va a ser muy difícil. Entonces tienes que tener esta como creatividad, esta pasión, este toque personal, personal touch, pero también tienes que tener esa distancia. Y si eso es importante, y sin esta distancia va a ser un poco difícil a veces. Yeah, thank you so much. That's really important to remember, actually. And it can be really hard, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Very hard. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask Juliana, ¿quieres entrar en la conversación? O let's see if there's more questions. Or Jack, if there's anything you want to say, just to add on.
No, not really. Other than please download Kinda World and give it a play and let me know what you think.
Por favor, descarga la aplicación Kinda World. Yeah. Okay. Hola, Juliana.
Thank you, Jack, for everything.
My pleasure.
Bueno, yo no quiero despedirme antes de contarles a las personas que están aquí con nosotros en el webinar, pues recordarles que nuestro programa de fortalecimiento para emprendedores y empresarios de la ciudad está activo. La ruta del emprendimiento cuenta con un incentivo puntualmente para emprendimientos creativos y culturales de 6.250.000 pesos en especie para robustecer las iniciativas de negocio. Entonces, toda la info la pueden encontrar en nuestra página web, cbs.rutanmedellin.org. Ingresan, conocen y pueden sacarle todo el provecho a este proceso.
¿Debería traducir esto a inglés o está bien?
No, porque como es nuestro
no es necesario.
No el público de Jack.
¿Listo?
Thank you so much, Jack.
Entonces, muchas gracias.
Gracias, Jack.
Thank you. Gracias a todos. Muchísimas gracias. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.